Hello, everybody. Let's see. Giving everything a little bit of time just to make sure that we are live. We need some intro music. I think that's...
I'm not convinced we are live.
There we go.
All right. Oh, there's a delay, most likely.
Yep, there's a delay. All right, so we are live.
We're learning. We're always learning about the YouTube. Anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome. We're seeing about 7 o'clock on the clock, and so we're just gonna give it a minute or two to let people arrive, and then we're gonna get started talking about Rhone Valley in France, one of the most famous premier wine regions in France.
Has a storied past, which is super fun. But of course, when we think about France, I think people's instinct is to always talk about Bordeaux, Burgundy, and Champagne. So I'm really glad that we were able to do the Loire Valley last time, and now we're going into the Rhone Valley, valley to valley.
You know, there's something somewhat similar about the Loire Valley and the Rhone Valley in that both of these regions contain sub-regions that differ a lot from each other. And really the thing holding them together is the river.
Yeah, which is fast. I mean, the Rhone Valley water is coming from the snowmelt out of the Alps, which is...
Sounds romantic.
So romantic. So if anybody went skiing on glaciers of the Alps this past winter, then...
For their ski break.
You might be drinking that water
that you
in wine form.
That you skied on?
In a couple of years.
How interesting.
I mean, only if you're cutting up some really good powder, though, I think. And then... Anyway,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So we have some white wine from the Rhone Valley open tonight. Although arguably the red is the most well-known globally.
Which is one of the things that we always like to try to do, is to expand people's horizons, not only just about the history, the terroir, the climate, and maybe a little bit of IP influences here and there, but also just some cool wines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're excited to share what we've learned. We're excited to share some pop culture references as well.
Well, and we aren't affiliated with anybody, but we like to throw in some plugs when people are doing some cool things. And it can be intimidating to travel, especially abroad. And so want to throw out just an awareness for the Viking River Cruise, because they do cruises or tour boats down.
Yes. If anyone has done one and they had some thoughts to share, we'd love to hear more about it, because it sounds like a great way to see some of the wine regions in France. So I'm very curious.
You don't have to drive, which is a nice perk.
Yes.
They take care of all the accommodations for you. It seems a lot of retirees do that, but I think we're retired at heart. We're ready for it.
All right, well, shall we officially get started?
Let's kick it off.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Beth.
And I'm Steven.
And this is Vino, Viticulture Intellectual Property and Enology Organization.
And tonight we're going to the Rhone Valley, so cheers.
Cheers.
Hope that everybody has their glass of wine that they would like to partake in this evening, and feel free to drink along. If you'd like to use the chat, feel free to share what you're drinking and what kind of tasting notes you're getting, what kind of textures you're feeling, and let's hop right into it. So today we are traveling from the Loire Valley.
We're in France again.
We are in France, and we're heading down to the Rhone Valley. There in that magenta pink. But really, we gotta stop by Lyon first. Lyon is one of the
gastronomical capitals of the world.
So many Michelin star restaurants. Everybody trying to get their Michelin star, get that credibility. What a way to kick off your vacation.
Absolutely.
For those of you that are joining us for the first time, you may want to fly in, just skip Paris, go straight into Geneva, hop on the train and go over those Alps mountains and meet us in Lyon. And then head on down.
I'm sure it's a beautiful, beautiful train ride. So, enjoy that.
That's how we would do it if we were head there today.
Yeah.
So, gotta talk about it. Well,
So we'll kick it off by talking about quality levels and some things to look out for when you're looking at the label of a wine from the Rhone Valley.
yeah, and we like to always talk about how to purchase these wines, especially our European wines, because the labels can be pretty intimidating. There's a lot of scriptiness that is just inherently hard to read, and then they seem to be getting more and more complex. But in this case, as it gets more complex and there's more information, especially on that front label, that is showing that there's a higher quality level.
Often. So what we're seeing here is a 3-level system, and this figure is really great from Wine Folly. It sort of talks about that. So there's Côte de Rhone, for example. Then we have a village level, and then we have a named village level. And in each case, we're getting sort of more and more site specific.
Trying to showcase that terroir, the essence of the place, the way the water, the soil, the climate all come together to create a unique expression of that wine. So you could have the same grape varietal, but if you were more than 50 miles away, then it would express itself differently. And they're trying to represent that through the label. And with each one of these more complex labels comes more complexity in terms of how you have to record your grapes, and just everything about it becomes more difficult, harder for the winemaker. But the whole purpose is that way us consumers know the product that we're getting. Identification of the source of goods and services through wine labels. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
All right, so I mentioned earlier in the preliminary remarks, but I'll say it again now. This region, like the Loire Valley, has subregions that differ a lot from each other. In the Rhone Valley, we're really breaking things up between the northern Rhone and the southern Rhone. These regions have different climates, they have different soils, and they have different grape varieties that they focus on, although there's some overlap in some of the varieties. They appear in both places. So we'll go through each a little bit, and you'll see some of the differences as we talk about them. We'll start in the north.
Yeah. Before we dive in further, I'm going to use my mouse. I think it pops up on the screen. Côte Rôtie is a great we're finding some value Syrah with Côte Rôtie right now. The price point is a little bit more approachable, so if you're interested in trying Syrah from the northern Rhone, that's a great place to try. Crozet Hermitage is a step up in terms of what the expression is going to be, and then Hermitage is the top of the top for this region here. So that's just a way to kind of break it down, some things while you're at the store.
You've probably seen those names, or you may see them in the future.
And we're starting to see a lot more of this Cornas as well, 100% Syrah. Although we do have white varietals that are here in the north.
Yes, so Syrah is the dominant red grape. It's really the only red grape you're going to see up here. So the red wines are Syrah. The whites, however, are going to be sort of two sorts. You're going to see Viognier, or you're going to see a Marsanne-Roussanne blend. And so the second one, the Marsanne-Roussanne blend, is what we are trying this evening.
How fun. Now, we're in the St. Joseph region, right? And this is the stretch. It's very long. It's on the east, and it has 30 miles of distance along the Rhone Valley. And so we're going to get into kind of what that means as a consumer when you're trying to purchase wines in this region.
So
but
here
first
we have
we're going to talk about the wine.
A little bit of the white wines. So as I mentioned, Viognier is here. Marsanne and Roussanne are often blended together. Marsanne will be the dominant, and Roussanne's added in there for a little bit of elegance. Roussanne is a little bit trickier to grow, so it's typically not going to be the dominant white grape. Viognier is becoming popular here on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lot of it here in Virginia. And something to kind of think about if these grapes are newer to you is that they are kind of an alternative to a bigger, full-bodied Chardonnay. So if you are interested in branching out from your Chardonnay for pairing with dinner, you might try a Viognier or a Marsanne-Roussanne blend.
Yeah. And now Viognier by itself, 100% Viognier, will express itself with very elegant white flower bouquets, a little bit of beeswax, but it'll be high acid and it'll be a little tight often, and so they will blend it on the East Coast especially to give it that body and that the complexity on the palate that you're looking for. And that's what we're getting out of our blends with our Marsanne and Roussanne. Each of these wines brings something between the approach, the mid palate, and the finish, right? That's why we're blending in the Rhone, is to give the consumer a great wine experience. Fun fact about Viognier is that Virginia was actually kind of touted as the savior for the grape varietal. It was really falling out of vogue, and Virginia, through Horton Vineyards, Horton Winery, they planted 47 acres and 27 acres, and then that has ballooned both in Virginia as well as back in the Rhone.
Yeah, famously, their sparkling Viognier was served at the White House for a few dinners.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah,
yeah.
So remember, the whites here are shown here, and then if you're thinking red in Northern Rhone, you're thinking Syrah, only Syrah.
Yeah.
All right.
Great breakdown. All right, Saint Joseph.
So this is the place that our white wine came from. This is in the Northern Rhone. We've got some pretty pictures.
Pretty pictures. So you can kind of see the river there up in the valley. And what's interesting about the Saint Joseph region is that it's eastward facing. And the premier land always has western and southwest exposure. A lot more light means more phenolic development, easier ripening, especially during cooler years. So it was less desirable. And also why we grow white grape varietals over here, right? That just the growing season and the conditions that we have are more acceptable and more lead to better quality grapes.
But things are warming up there, aren't they? So
That's right.
The eastern facing is not struggling as much with ripeness as before. So it's
Yeah, and Viognier is interesting. I know that we're drinking Marsanne and Roussanne. I do appreciate the Viognier grape. It suffers from powdery mildew, and so with the way the winds come through that region,
especially in the south.
Especially in the south, yeah.
Okay, so
more pretty pictures.
The slopes of the vineyards in the Northern Rhone can be quite steep, and they're typically going to be closer to the river. So you can see it's quite, laborious to be picking grapes from these vineyards.
Yeah. And, like I said, there's 30 miles that extend through the whole St. Joseph region. And one thing that's interesting to note about the terroir of this region is that we have clay granite in the northern part, and then at the bottom we have more, granite and like clay limestone.
Clay and limestone.
And so clay and limestone are going to give us really more like elegant, rounder notes versus the north that maybe have a little bit different phenolic development. And the granite's also just going to add a sense of minerality to the wine, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Again, just as we're coming into the dusk of the day, it's a pretty picture overlooking not only the river but the cities on the other side of the river as well.
Yeah.
So nice. And we get to travel there through our bottle.
Yes.
So let's see, Guigal. How do you pronounce
Guigal?
it?
Guigal. We looked up Guigal.
Yeah.
So this is a very famous negociant here. This is one of the big names you're going to see. You're going to see this, and you're going to see another name that's difficult to pronounce that I dare not try. But there is a quality producer. We're looking at a Marsanne Roussanne blend, as we mentioned. It's meant to be enjoyed right away. This one isn't really something for aging, although the reds, the Syrahs from Northern Rhone can age forever.
Yes, indeed. As we're saying, like 30 miles of land, how do you pick a producer to try? If you're unfamiliar with an area, sometimes the negociants is a great way to explore the region, right? Because they are sourcing the grapes, they're trying to make a product. And, when we're trying this white, you get a sense of what the winemaker can do. Although this was, a more affordable bottle of wine.
Should give you a really good sense of what this blend can be.
This negociant's bottles can range into the multiple hundreds of dollars per bottle. So it's not that, it's just a good intro to what he can do. And what's fascinating about this specific, when he makes wine, is that Robert Parker actually proclaimed that he may be the greatest winemaker in the world. Yeah, this was back in the late 1980s and 1990s. And so, one of our IP focuses is to talk about influence, right? Like the copyright that you make when you put your opinion out there, what your name means. And that's all kind of intellectual property. Who are you? What's your identity? And we can't really talk about Rhone without talking about Robert Parker. He was a huge influence to this region, and he identified this as a great alternative to Bordeaux, right? It's got the fruit forward notes that Robert Parker's signature really appreciated. It's bold, it's complex, and that's what he looked for. And he, in the 1980s, 1990s, put the Rhone Valley on the map, right? By giving it 100 point ratings for 2 years in a row, and then again, it was at 1989, 1990, and then again in 1999, gave 100-point ratings for Côte de Rhone wines. And that just kind of took the world by storm, and people started to wake up. They started to recognize, hey, this is a great wine region. Exports started to increase. Then, because supply and demand, prices increase on the value of the cost of the bottles, and there's more wine, more money in the wine region, and so people can start to expand and improve the wine overall. I think it's interesting because he does have a style, and people tailor their style in order to fit Robert Parker's palate. And with this first wine being floral and beautiful, but also having that oak characteristic that makes it round and luscious, would be a nod to what Robert Parker's tasting profile appreciates. And it's just a little bit of tidbit about the importance of being influencers, I guess.
All right, so now we're moving to the southern Rhone. So as we mentioned, these two regions sub-regions can be very different. So this is Mediterranean climate. Northern Rhone was continental climate. Northern Rhone was more granitic soils. This is going to be more clay and limestone. It's going to be warmer here, a lot warmer. We are in southern France. This is where lavender is growing, and it's olives, but there is an interesting feature here that helps them out, and that is the mistral wind coming in from the Alps. And so this is a really strong wind, very cold, and what that can do is that can help balance the heat, because it's bringing in the cold air, and can also help dry things out when they get a little wet towards the end of the growing season. So it can be very beneficial. However, it can also be so strong that it just rips the grapes, right off the vine. So it's the most desirable plots are ones that get the wind, but they are somewhat sheltered so that they can get the benefits without the dangers of being destroyed.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We always try to find new ways to bring narratives of wine out. Side by side tasting, white and red, Northern Rhone, Southern Rhone. Another cool tasting would be a Southern Rhone with a Sicilian wine, and we would be able to test the Mistral winds of the Alps versus the Sirocco winds coming off the Sahara Desert, and so you could have a windy wine tasting.
That sounds delightful.
Yeah.
We'll have to do that.
We'll have to do that sometime.
Yeah. So here, a lot more grape varieties are going to be present. So both white and red. Grenache is going to be our big red, dominant red here. However, Syrah is still there, and Mourvedre is our third most popular red grape here. So you might have heard GSM, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. That's going to be pretty dominant. But there are 20-something varieties that can be, found here, and we're going to get into it soon. But the particular region, Chateauneuf du Pape, you can have 18 different grapes in that wine. So this is a blending region.
And so just to bring home that point about blending, and when we talk about the GSM, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, what we get with that is the Syrah brings our approach, right? It has really high intensity, very fruit forward. That's where we're getting a lot of those, that strong impact when we first get a sense of the wine. And then through the mid palate, that's where the Grenache is going to come in, really developing that mid palate. And then the Mourvedre is going to carry through with phenolics for length. And so when we blend them all together in different consistencies, we can make a great experience for the wine consumer. And that's why we blend, because otherwise you're just left to the single varietal and what it can give.
Another thing to think about here is, given the heat on very hot years, sometimes grapes lose some of their real finesse, but as a blend, you can still make a really beautiful wine.
Very true.
Pretty pictures. So here, a lot of the grapes are not going to be on such steep hills by the river, but they're going to be on these sort of more rolling hills outward from the river. Also famously here, they have these giant rocks. Do we have a picture of the rocks?
I think we do.
Yeah,
there it is.
These like giant rocks are here, and these rocks can help trap heat, so it can actually make things hotter. But they also help with water management and drainage and things like that. So it's just kind of a really striking view. But you can tell that then working on these lands would be pretty difficult.
Pretty difficult. It just has to be such an amazing scene to see these boulders. They're the size of cantaloupes, is that what they said?
They can get that big,
and
big. They've all rolled off the Alps.
Yeah, and just seeing grapevines pop up through them. It would be an absolute magical scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little pop culture.
We just finished this show.
Yeah. Drops of God actually features the wine region of Chateauneuf de Pape, and so might as well call it out. We're talking about IP, and we all know that shows and movies are a form of copyright, and so Drops of God features it. They do a lot of tasting. They really embellish on that. What are the essences? White flower, Meyer lemon, those types of things. Truffle. Which is fun. It's we consider it a party trick, but it is a nice way to communicate about the wine and connect with other people. That's the point of wine, right? It's transportive to a time and place, like we're traveling over right now to southern Rhone. But it's also a great way to just help communicate amongst other people. And as we said, hopefully it's not too much of a spoiler. At one point, they are making wine. And we have a picture here of what that process in theory could look like. You have single varietals, bottled, aged, and then she's able to mix and match the different percentages of the different Chateauneuf de Pape varietals that were grown in order to try to remake a very iconic wine for that region. I thought it was interesting thinking back as we're preparing these slides that it's set, I believe the bottle was a 1990 bottle that they were trying to recreate, which just so happens to be around the time that Robert Parker kind of signified, hey, this is a wine region of note. I almost wonder if it's a nod to Robert Parker and what he did for the region, focusing on that and the influence that influencers of wine can have for identifying regions that aren't super popular.
So here, again, this is an example of all the different grape varietals that could be present in your glass of Chateauneuf. So a lot. This is not one that's just 2 or 3 things, and so it's kind of fun to try to memorize them all. Go home and do that. You can try that.
Have fun.
Yeah.
We didn't mention this before, and sorry to hop back to the northern Rhone. There are regions in the Côte Rôtie when we first talked about it that actually blend white and red. They'll blend up to 20%, but typically around.
Roussan is in here, for example. You can see that, and that's in Grenache Blanc. So this is a region that does actually blend reds and whites. That's not super common anymore, not super popular, but they still do.
And by doing that, again, you can change what the expression of the wine is, right? You can add a light, elegant, floral note to a wine. Make it a different experience. So, another little IP reference.
And we can get into why is it called Chateauneuf de Pape.
Oh,
so
sure.
That relates to, if anyone has read this book, it famously does reference the fact that the Chateauneuf de Pape bottles come with the shield and the keys, St. Peter's keys, are on there. And so even if you were to rip the label off, you still know it's a Chateauneuf de Pape because the bottle itself has a reference. So this is this name comes from the fact that the Pope had a castle. An area built near Avignon for some time in the 14th century, and so it is the castle of the Pope.
Yeah, and we see that
new castle of the Pope.
Yeah, in the engravement of the bottles, which
if you're looking at yours, ours is somewhere else. You'll see it.
Yeah, and so in the book, they rip all the wine labels off and say all white and red wine cost the same. They are the same, and this count goes into into the wine cellar and looks for the keys engraved in the bottle because he knows the quality of Chateauneuf de Pape.
Yeah.
And here
So you can see it here, yeah, in the image of the focus bottle we have tonight. The keys are on there.
And so about the producer that we're trying here, right? They have 74 hectares, 56 are in Chateauneuf de Pape, which is a lot of land. They really started making the wine 1846 was when they started. There was a marriage that happened that brought two families together, and that's how we get...
As often happens in the wine world.
Which is a beautiful story, right? And they are currently focused on upholding the traditional winemaking themes for Chateauneuf de Pape, focused on sustainability. And so as we talk about Robert Parker and our first wine that I think maybe used a little bit of oak influence that was very indicative of Robert Parker's palate, I question, do you think as an audience that this family is trying to use oak and make a big robust wine, or are they having a little bit higher acid, letting the fruit come forward in an elegant kind of style and letting the terroir speak, right?
Yeah, it's becoming much more of a thing to have. Well, it always has been to let the wine show through. The oak has been more of the large barrels, and it's not. You can see here that the wine axis is rated the oak intensity rather low. So we'd be interested to see what you're tasting and what you're thinking. Another interesting thing about this one is 60% Grenache, 40% Syrah. So they're keeping it pure.
That's right.
Just the GS.
Just the GS. A little bit higher acid, I think, than you sometimes find in some Chateauneuf de Pape bottles.
Things to pair it with? Are we ready to talk about things to pair it with?
I wanted to talk about the vintage real quick.
We'll talk about the vintage first, and then we'll move on to pairings.
Because I just realized when I was doing an analysis of vintages that we used to tout about how important 2016 was for Chateauneuf de Pape and the Rhone.
15 throughout the whole of Europe.
15 but those bottles are now old, and 2020 is now the vintage to look for when you're at restaurants, because it'll be uncommon to find a 2016 because that is an old bottle now. Even though if you can still find 2016, of course, drink it. They're also
or let it age even longer.
Or let it age
depending
even
on
longer.
How you're feeling. It could go longer potentially, depending on the quality.
But 2020 is another vintage year to look out for. And when we say exceptional vintages, it just means that growing conditions were really easy. So a lot of people
did well.
They did well. You can work with your field managers and your winemakers in order to get stylistically what you are shooting for, which is really a cool thing. Harder vintages mean that you have to work with what the world gives you.
Yeah, which I would say then on tougher vintage, you probably want to go for a Southern Rhone, because the blending allows them to sort of deal with the consequences of a tougher vintage, whereas in the North, where you're just 100% Syrah, you're really at the whims of the weather, and so maybe that's not going to be the best year, although it's still delightful.
Sure.
I'm sure. So all right, well, so when it comes to pairing, this region in the Southern Rhone is famous for lamb. The sheep roam around this region and eat the scrubby herb brushes, and sort of, so they do say what grows together goes together. So lamb is a classic pairing, but also big cheeses. Like this one can handle some big cheeses, some milk cheeses, some goat cheeses. So that could be another fun pairing to try out.
And don't be afraid if you open up a bottle and it smells a little horsey or barnyardy, or sometimes like smoked meat. Those are kind of indicative of this region.
Yeah, smoked meat actually you'll find a lot in the Northern Rhone, and it can be quite fun.
It can be.
Yeah.
And so you can play with that when you're tasting the wine. So I think one of the important things with Rhone is to open that bottle, let it air, but then also try it and see if you can add some herbs into your dishes in order to try to pull out some of those nuanced herb notes.
Yeah, so hopefully this gave you a sense of the diversity that's out there, even in the Rhone, but you'll find these varietals all around the world.
Because it's just, the GSM blend is so great. Oh no! Sorry, hold on one second. It's so great at really delivering a great experience because of the approach of having that approach, the mid palate, and then the finish, the length of the wine. So we start to see it, popping up around the world.
Totally. You'll see it in Spain. You'll see it in California, Washington, Australia. Notice these are all places that can have quite warm vineyards, and so they're taking advantage of the fact that you can make a really lovely blend in a warm climate.
And one last time, that's Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, GSM blend.
Yeah.
So if you want to be hip and cool, you can just be like, hey, pour me that GSM blend.
Very hip.
Very hip.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. And with that, thank you so much for your time this evening.
It was wonderful to spend a little time with you. I hope you enjoy some wines from the Rhone soon.
Yes. And see you next time as we walk into, maybe tip our toe.
Just look at the water.
Oh,
If the next topic was a pool or an ocean, we're just gonna look
at the water.
Maybe approach it.
Yeah,
but we're gonna be talking about Burgundy.
Burgundy is a beast.
People study it their whole lives.
Yeah,
but we're gonna try to do our best to give a quick overview
in about 20 minutes. So we'll see what we can do, and look forward to it.
Yeah, so we'll see you in about a month.